News that Vladimir Putin plans to crush Kyiv and has already selected a puppet government to install in Ukraine. This as Russian troops unleash a punishing new wave of attacks on innocent citizens. ABC's Ian Pennell reports from Kyiv.
Russia again striking civilian areas. A devastating attack on Chernihiv, a city 90 miles north of Kyiv. Dashcam footage capturing the impact. A freeze frame shows multiple projectiles about to strike as unsuspecting people walk down the streets. And then the explosions, sending residents running for their lives. 33 were killed, 18 wounded, according to the city emergency services. If confirmed, it'll be the largest single loss of civilian life in this conflict so far. The rescue operation suspended because of ongoing shelling. As the net closes in on many major cities, the defenders of the capital are digging in. Defences are now being set up across the city. Concrete barricades, tank traps, as the city prepares for a Russian assault. We met a defiant President Zelensky at a secret location in the capital. For how long can you hang on? I don't know, he said. I don't know how long. It doesn't depend on time, it depends on us. And when I asked if he'd leave the country, Zelensky was adamant.
No.
But just 30 miles from where we were speaking, the full scale of the horrors being inflicted upon Ukraine. This is what a scorched earth policy looks like, and it doesn't discriminate between soldier and citizen. Hard to imagine that just 1 week ago, this was an ordinary neighborhood, with families going about their lives. The Kremlin seems to be having most success in the south. After taking Kherson, the first major city to fall in this conflict, Russian troops bearing down on Mykolaiv, and the Russian fleet approaching Odessa in what looks like an attempt to seal off Ukraine from the Black Sea coast. In Kyiv, as many as 15,000 people have been taking shelter in the subway. But there is defiance and unity here. Ukrainian lawmakers singing their national anthem in parliament before starting their work. President Zelensky was relaxed and engaging, if also clearly tired, surviving on a few hours' sleep a night. He thanked President Biden for the support and sanctions, but what he really wants now is a no-fly zone, something the White House has ruled out. Let's not forget that this is a former actor who had relatively low approval ratings a couple of weeks ago. Today, he has the weight of the nation on his shoulders, and he's risen to the occasion, not just as Commander-in-Chief, but as a wartime leader. And that is an awesome responsibility to bear. Ian Pennell, ABC News, in Kyiv, Ukraine.
Ian, thank you. The UN says there are 500,000 children among the million-plus refugees who have fled Ukraine. The families continue to cross into neighboring countries in droves, mostly arriving by train, and they're being met by strangers offering to take them in. The latest talks between Russia and Ukraine led to a deal to open humanitarian corridors to allow more people to escape the war.
Here in the U.S., Senator Lindsey Graham says Vladimir Putin should be assassinated by his own people. Graham made the suggestion in a TV appearance, then repeated it on Twitter, saying a Russian assassin, quote, would be doing your country and the world a great service. Meanwhile, the U.S. has slapped new sanctions on a Kremlin spokesman and several Russian oligarchs seizing yachts and planes in hopes they will pressure Putin to end the war. As sanctions take effect, ordinary Russians are telling ABC's James Longman they support what they believe is an effort to free Ukraine from fascist control.
This lady has just stopped us to say that she completely believes in what the government is saying they're doing in Ukraine, but she wants to make it very clear they love Ukrainians. They don't want to see them hurt. They love Ukraine. Love Ukraine. Yeah. That's the direction they're coming at it from. This is not about hurting Ukraine. They want to say that Russia is trying to save Ukraine, and that is exactly what Vladimir Putin has been telling his people for days, weeks, and months.
James Longman there on the ground in Moscow. Russian lawmakers are debating a new law today. It essentially makes broadcasting news the government doesn't agree with punishable by up to 15 years in prison.
With the war now into its second week, some Americans are coming off the sidelines.
They're heading to the war zone to help in any way that they can. Will Gans is here now with those details. Will.
Hey, Andrew. Yeah, we'll begin with a couple who are not using their last names in order to protect their identities, tying the knot in a spur-of-the-moment ceremony and postponing their honeymoon altogether so the groom can join the resistance in Ukraine.
Over the past 8 days, the world has seen the remarkable resolve of Ukrainian citizens stepping up to defend their democracy. And now, Americans joining them on the front lines.
I'm going to hop a flight, hopefully all the way to Warsaw, and join up with the Ukrainians and help them however they want me to help them.
Brian, a Marine Corps veteran, marrying his fiancée Mia early in Salt Lake City on Wednesday after deciding to join the Ukrainian Defense Forces.
It feels hard, but it feels right. Yeah, it's 100% the right thing to do.
The couple delaying their honeymoon. Brian saying it's his calling to help because if he steps up, it means he can possibly take the place of a young teen from having to defend their country right now. And in New York, Tatiana and Roman Gulak both headed back to Poland to volunteer. Once there, they will decide whether or not they will cross the border to join the resistance.
When someone is trying to take your land, you don't care about all this, how you will go, whom you will join. You just go there, you join, you fight.
I will decide. I'm not telling that I will be picking up guns, but I will definitely do whatever I can do till the end.
And on Long Island, a county executive announcing a gun drive for Ukrainian citizens fighting against Russian forces.
We want rifles, AR-15s, and shotguns.
The drive coming after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has pleaded for more weaponry for his forces.
Of course, there's a ton of red tape around something like a gun drive. Nassau County executives asking for help from the federal government to get those guns to forces in Ukraine who so desperately need them, you guys.
All right, Will, thank you. Yeah, just so many people are just trying to help in any way they can, small, large, thousands of miles away. Doesn't matter. We're seeing it all across the world. All right, thanks, Will. All right, coming up, a look at the women in Vladimir Putin's life.
But first, the massive fire that swallowed up a set used for Downton Abbey.
And this weekend's farewell game of Duke's Coach K. You're watching World News Now.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
My wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident. There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
Is that the gun?
That's not the gun.
What is it? I won't ask you again, then. Are you a Nazi?
The deeper you go into the black market,
you put your life at risk.
the darker it gets.
Why hasn't anyone come out and spoken?
It's about the money, that's all I'm doing.
Trafficked. New episodes Wednesdays at 9 on National Geographic.
This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes.
You got intrigued to see fantasy. It's all there.
Can't peel your eyes away.
Any comments, Elizabeth? Any comments, Elizabeth?
God bless you, girl boss.
The new man in her life, the new baby. And now, as Elizabeth Holmes awaits sentencing, what you haven't seen, haven't heard.
Behind the scenes, it was an absolute mess.
My jaw dropped.
Part of the human trait, being fascinated by a train wreck.
I was blown away.
The new 2020 tonight on ABC.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know? need to know.
To help you not just get through your day,
But to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
What started as a brazen theft in a San Francisco Walgreens ended in a bizarre food fight. A man had stepped behind the counter, loaded up his bags, while scared workers called police. Suddenly, he started hurling bananas and cookies at a customer who tried to intervene and then eventually left the store.
Police are investigating why an SUV plowed through the wall of a preschool in the Northern California town of Anderson. They say 19 children, or at least two adults, were inside, including one child who was trapped under the vehicle. Nobody died, but all the children and one staffer were treated at hospitals for a range of injuries. Investigators say the driver was not impaired.
Now to a stunning twist in the case of Sherry Papini, the California mom who claimed she was kidnapped. She is now under arrest for lying to police and faces up to 25 years in prison. Papini's disappearance in early November of 2016 triggered a massive search and nationwide headlines. She reappeared on Thanksgiving Day, bruised and battered, claiming two Hispanic women held and tortured her. Investigators now say she made the whole thing up and instead was staying with an ex-boyfriend.
Fire has destroyed part of British TV and film history. The flames roared through a former mill which had been used in Downton Abbey and many other projects. There were no injuries. The building was once the area's largest textile mill, employing over 2,000 employees. And here in the U.S., what will truly be the end of an era?
Can't believe it, but tomorrow is the final regular season home game for Duke's men's basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski. Coach K's last game in Cameroon Indoor Stadium will be against who else but Duke's biggest rival, North Carolina, the Tar Heels. Now get this, Mona, ticket prices are at Super Bowl levels for this regular season game. The cheapest one on a ticket site going for over $3,400.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
The frightening words from Russian President Vladimir Putin tonight. It's all going according to plan. Putin's claim comes as he turns up the relentless attacks on Ukraine and its people. Attacks like this. A residential building in northern Ukraine is hit with a Russian strike. Responders say 22 people were killed, and they're still searching for survivors in the rubble. The U.S. and its allies turning up the heat on Russia's elite, seizing things like super yachts. The White House rolling out another round of sanctions on Putin, and new calls tonight to ban oil shipments from Russia. A refugee crisis only growing more dire. 1 million Ukrainians have fled their homes, more than half of them children. The flood of people into Poland, and the aid waiting on the other side of the border. Everyday people buying rifles and building bunkers, all to protect their country. Meet the Ukrainian civilians arming themselves to fight in this war.
A mine? These are mines. So do they work still? Yeah.
Tonight, ABC News Live has reports from Ukraine, Poland, and Russia.
Oh, I know about ivermectin.
The truth about ivermectin, doctors and healthcare leaders sounding the alarm about the small but vocal group of doctors pushing the use of the anti-parasite medication that's unproven in the fight against COVID, and some are making big money. Congress is investigating while a major study is launched to see if ivermectin can help treat the virus. Tonight, our in-depth look at this medicine and the role misinformation is playing in its popularity. A major headline from the House committee investigating the January 6th insurrection now saying Donald Trump may have committed multiple crimes. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with dramatic and harrowing images coming in from Ukraine. Now, day 8 of Russia's invasion, and tonight it appears that more civilians are being targeted, and officials fear the worst is yet to come. Dashcam footage shows an explosion in a northern Ukrainian city. The shelling there also set an oil depot on fire. Reports indicate dozens of citizens died. And take a look at this drone footage. A town near Kyiv just devastated. But in the face of grave danger and long odds, more Ukrainians are deciding to fight for their country. Our team saw firsthand today dozens of men and women lining up to get guns. They've also built mines to try to stop Russian tanks. Despite many reports to the contrary, Russia continues to insist everything is going as planned. Putin addressed his nation today, claiming the operation is proceeding strictly in line with the timetable. We are standing by to talk with a spokesperson for the Pentagon and also a member of the Ukrainian parliament. But first, our Ian Panel leads us off once again from Kyiv.
Tonight, Russia again striking civilian areas. A devastating attack on Chernihiv, a city 90 miles north of Kyiv. Dashcam footage capturing the impact. A freeze frame shows multiple projectiles about to strike as unsuspecting people walk down the streets. And then, the explosions, sending residents running for their lives. 33 were killed, 18 wounded, according to the city emergency services. If confirmed, it'll be the largest single loss of civilian life in this conflict so far. The rescue operation suspended because of ongoing shelling. As the net closes in on many major cities, the defenders of the capital are digging in. Defences are now being set up across the city. Concrete barricades, tank traps, as the city prepares for a Russian assault. We met a defiant President Zelensky today at a secret location in the capital.
For how long can you hang on?
I don't know, he said. I don't know how long. It doesn't depend on time, it depends on us. And when I asked if he'd leave the country, Zelensky was adamant.
No.
But just 30 miles from where we were speaking, the full scale of the horrors being inflicted upon Ukraine. This is what a scorched earth policy looks like, and it doesn't discriminate between soldier and citizen. Hard to imagine that just 1 week ago, this was an ordinary neighborhood, with families going about their lives. The Kremlin seems to be having most success in the south. After taking Kherson, the first major city to fall in this conflict, Russian troops bearing down on Mykolaiv, and the Russian fleet approaching Odessa in what looks like an attempt to seal off Ukraine from the Black Sea coast. Amid the sound of war, they're still talking. A second round of urgent negotiations was held today between Ukrainian and Russian officials. Both sides have provisionally agreed to possible temporary ceasefires in some places and to open humanitarian corridors for civilians to leave besieged cities. But the Ukrainian side saying, unfortunately, we didn't get the results we'd hoped for. The largest city under Russian siege right now is Kharkiv in the east. It's been mercilessly bombed for days. With the fall of Kherson, Kharkiv and 3 other cities are now encircled by Putin's troops. But outside Kyiv, the miles-long Russian convoy has been stalled for days, a few miles outside the city. A senior US official telling ABC News the convoy seems to be stalled by Ukrainian resistance and supply problems. And as the Russians move up from the south, a siege of the city seems unavoidable. President Putin today claiming the invasion was going strictly according to plan and that all objectives were being met. The reality on the ground suggests otherwise. But he ominously declared Ukrainians and Russians are one people. Earlier, Putin spent 90 minutes on the phone with French President Macron. A source in the French government telling ABC News tonight the fear is that the worst is yet to come. And that's the fear in much of Kyiv tonight, where as many as 15,000 people have been taking shelter in the subway. But there is defiance and unity here. Ukrainian lawmakers singing their national anthem in parliament before starting their work today.
Some powerful images there. Ian Panel joins us once again from the Ukrainian capital tonight. Ian, we saw that you met with President Zelensky at that secret location with other members of the media today. Give us your impressions of how he's doing, how he's shouldering all of this as he leads his country through war.
Yeah, Lindsay, I mean, he was relaxed, very engaging. You know, he didn't stand on the podium. He pulled up a chair and sat literally 2 feet in front of me. But he's tired. He's surviving on just a few hours' sleep a night. He thanked President Biden for the support and sanctions, not just America, but obviously a lot of other countries, especially in Europe as well. But what he really wants is a no-fly zone. And, of course, in his heart, he knows this is something that the rest of the world, America, can't agree to, because it would mean deploying forces into this conflict and potentially running into some kind of skirmish, or perhaps even greater, against Russia. And that's something that everyone's ruling out. But, of course, what he knows is that he's facing an overwhelmingly stronger Russian force which is bearing down on this city and other cities around the country. You know, let's not forget that this is a former actor who had relatively low approval ratings just a couple of weeks ago, and he's had to rise to the occasion, not just as commander-in-chief, but a wartime leader with the conscience and destiny of the nation on his shoulders. He knows this is an existential moment, not just for him, because the Russians are undoubtedly targeting him and his family, but for his city and his country. Lindsay?
Ian Panel, thanks so much again for your reporting on the ground there in Kyiv. In some parts of Ukraine, they've had some unexpected success in slowing the assault from the massive Russian forces, at least in part because of the regular people who are standing up to fight on behalf of their country. ABC's Matt Gutman has more on Ukraine's growing insurgency.
As darkness and the cold closed in on Lviv tonight, we were invited into this sprawling checkpoint. But its concrete bunkers, coils of concertina wire, and ramparts of sandbags weren't built by the Ukrainian military.
We built this. With your wives, your parents, and children, you built all of this.
Yeah.
The sandbags, the drums.
Yeah, from the one day.
Oleg is one of the civilian commanders here. He wanted to show us something.
What is that? A mine?
Yeah.
These are mines.
Yeah.
So do they work still?
Yeah.
So this is to what, blow up Russian tanks?
Yes.
They're the seed of a growing insurgency. Local defense groups telling us they've made thousands of Molotov cocktails like these, stockpiling many of them at checkpoints. And earlier today, we saw dozens of men and women arming themselves, feet stamping in the cold for hours, waiting for their turn to buy rifles. Among them, Luca, who grew up in Philadelphia, but now lives here with his wife and infant son.
Many people want to be prepared, want to arm themselves, because you never know if the front lines are going to be over there or come over here.
Lindsay, the fighters of the young insurgency we met at that checkpoint are not naive. They know the U.S. isn't going to send troops. There won't be NATO boots on the ground here. But they say they can't fight off the Russian invasion with just Molotov cocktails on those old Soviet mines we saw. They say they need more weapons. Lindsay.
Matt, thank you. World News Tonight anchor and managing editor David Muir joins us now from Poland and Ukraine border. David, thanks so much for talking with us tonight. You've been to a number of conflict zones and are planning to do a primetime special tomorrow on ABC. We saw your report, including the tears and the teddy bears and the kindness of people opening up their homes. What has moved you? What has struck you the most on the ground there so far?
Well, you know, Lindsay, I know you're a student of history, too, and what immediately strikes you is that the scenes that you're met with when you arrive here at the train station, and we're not far from the Ukraine border here in Poland, are scenes reminiscent of World War II. And, you know, we have reported this for many weeks now, that the situation unfolding in Europe is the likes of which they haven't seen as far as a ground war, an unprovoked invasion, the worst they've seen since World War II, quite frankly. And when you see the families get off the trains here carrying, you know, backpacks or one piece of luggage, and that's all they have of their belongings. The UN out with that number, more than 1 million refugees now from Ukraine fleeing safety for their families. And this was stunning. This came out just today. They believe that 500,000 refugees are in fact children. So this is a generation of young people who will be affected by this long term. You see the resilience in their faces. You know, a little guy waved at me today, the smiles they're carrying. A teddy bear, or there's one was carrying Flounder from a movie I'm sure you know, Lindsay. And I always think of the stories of children and their resilience, but of course the parents too, who've tried to create this environment so that their children aren't as fearful as really the rest of the world is watching this unfold. And so many of the families told me they hope to go home. They want their free Ukraine back. They know that that's not necessarily what's going to play out here, but they remain hopeful. most importantly for their children who are watching and sensing their parents' every move here. But I have to tell you, Lindsay, you also mentioned the generosity when you were tossing it to me. There are people who have driven here from all over Europe. I met a couple from Denmark holding up a sign that said, "We have room for 8 persons free." That's what their sign said. They basically drove 2 cars, 2 separate cars, a husband and wife, to fill their cars with people. They're going to take them home to Denmark and take care of them until they can find a place to live and a new chapter in their lives.
And people just opening up their hearts and their homes. David, thank you so much for your reporting and talking with us tonight. We are looking forward to your primetime special tomorrow night.
Thanks, Lindsay.
We're joined now by Ukrainian Member of Parliament Sofia Fedina in Kyiv for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting, and thank you that you care.
Of course we do. And give us a sense of what Kyiv has faced in just the past 24 hours as far as the Russian attacks on the city. What are you seeing right now?
Right now, we had, once again, the air alarm, and all the people have gone to the safe places. But actually, every half an hour in Kyiv happens like this, and people, especially at the evening time, in their majority sit in the safe places or in the metro station that is very deep here in Kyiv, so it's safe for people. On the other hand, we know that there is ongoing attack on Kyiv, and some regiments of airborne forces of Moscow Federation want to enter the city, but Ukrainian army is defending and doing its best. Also, we know the information that tanks were approaching all the time, and several times during the day. Also, there was a shelling of Kyiv, but our anti-aircraft system was working quite good, and only the pieces of the rockets were ruining the buildings. But still, the resistance is keeping strong. Both army, territorial defense, volunteers, and all the people in all the regions of Ukraine. You know, it's in the times of war, it's hard to get jokes, but we joke here in Ukraine that Putin and his invasion united all Ukraine, united for 100%.
Very true, and I'm glad you guys can still have some upbeat spirit in the midst of all this. You know, we have a correspondent, Ian Pannell, who's on the ground in Kyiv, and today he had the opportunity to ask President Zelensky, how long can you hold out against the Russian advance? And the president's response was, I don't know. And I know that Ukrainian people have shown just tremendous resilience and a willingness to fight for your country. But how long do you think that you can keep it up as Russia continues to press and continues its advance?
First of all, we were getting ready for this for the last 8 years because it was ongoing Moscow aggression. The invasion started not only on the 24th of February 2022, but it started on the 20th of February 2014. And at that time, we had only 5,000 soldiers in Ukrainian army. In the next years, we were building the army up to 255,000. And we have never had such a big support from civilians, from common people, because almost every village, every small town, every city, they have their own territorial defense forces and they have their own volunteers, and everyone is working for Ukrainian victory. Of course, we are really grateful for our international partners that they started to help us, especially with the position of the United States. But the question is that maybe at some point all together help was a bit too late, because I think that if we had implemented some more sanctions previously in advance, maybe there would not be such a big invasion and such a bloodshed right now in Ukraine. The problem is when you ask the question, how long can we stand? I know that Ukrainians will fight till the very victory, because we understand that this is the fight for our existence, for our independence. But on the other hand, this is the mutual international world fight for democracy, human rights, peace and security. We need to close the sky somehow to get rid of the rockets and of the planes of Moscow Federation. There's just bombing and shelling us, sometimes from the territory of Moscow Federation, sometimes from the territory of Belarus. And how to close it, it's also a question to give Ukraine as much defensive weapon, lethal weapon as possible, but also all the other possible military aid as the army is growing, every army army every hour.
And Sophia, I know that you have a leadership role, but I'm just curious for you and your family, how you're managing to stay safe through all of this. Are you planning to stay in Kyiv as well?
Actually, I've been to Kyiv when everything started. Then I went for a few days to Lviv because my husband is in airborne forces. And on Monday, he went to one of the most complicated places in the war zone where Moscow Federation Army attacked. Now I returned to Kyiv to work in the parliament, and we had an extraordinary meeting. And who knows, it seems that in the next few days, I will go to the east or to the north to find out how we can more help people. Actually, every member of parliament has to do this, and we have to be as close to our people and to help as much as we can.
But just let me just cut you off 1 second.
Yes.
Just how do you stay so strong in the midst of all of this that's happening all around you?
I've been volunteer for Ukrainian army, and in these years it has become like an integral part of me. We have to do this because our soldiers on the front line, it's much harder for them than for us to be in peaceful places, in the safe places. So we have to do everything possible for them to have a chance to thrive. That's the most important part, and this is a big motivation. On the other hand, my family suffered from very heavy repressions of the Soviet Union. I should not be born because my mother was repressed. Almost of my family, of my mother's side, they starved to death in the Great Famine times. My father's family was persecuted because the grandfather was a priest. And I think every second family in Ukraine has such a story. So we are fighters. We know how to survive, and we know how to fight for our rights and for our own country. That is what is uniting Ukraine today as well. We know that our fight is right.
Ukrainian Member of Parliament Sofia Fedina, we thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate you sharing your story and what you guys are going through. We really just appreciate it. And today, President Biden announced more sanctions on a new group of Vladimir Putin's supporters, those oligarchs, as well as their relatives and close associates, blocking their travel to the U.S. and moving to seize their assets. Meanwhile, in Russia, the economy is feeling the strain, and there are reports that authorities are blocking some Russians from leaving. ABC's James Longman is in Moscow.
Tonight, America's economic assault on Russia's elite ramps up a gear. The White House hoping financial pain will force Putin to end his war. Among those targeted in new sanctions are Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov and oligarchs Nikolai Tokarev and Alisher Usmanov, some of Russia's wealthiest people and close Putin allies. Usmanov's superyacht seized by Germany, his private jet now banned in the US, both estimated to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
The goal was to maximize the impact on Putin and Russia, and to minimize the harm on us and our allies and friends around the world.
The US is also blocking at least 19 oligarchs and 47 of their relatives and close associates from traveling to the United States. Overseas, the European Union is already taking action against Putin's circle. This 280-foot yacht owned by the CEO of state oil company Rosneft seized in the south of France. The US and its allies are going after the oligarchs, Russia's richest, because they believe Putin's closest, wealthiest friends might have the most influence.
Think of mafia, where everybody kisses the ring of the boss, and he makes lots and lots of money. By sanctioning them, we are putting pressure on all of Putin's ruling kleptocracy.
In 2017, one estimate put Putin's own worth at over $200 billion. And tonight, 8 days into the war, the Russian ruble has lost nearly half of its value. 1 ruble now worth a little less than 1 cent on the dollar.
James Longman joins us now. And James, you mentioned there what you heard outside Moscow on some support for this war. And how are those Russians viewing the sanctions and their impact?
Yeah, Lindsay, we actually went about an hour outside of Moscow to a town on the suburbs. You will hear one view in the main cities here in Russia, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, about Vladimir Putin, but just go a little further out and the view is pretty common, which is that they support him. One thing I heard over and over again in the market there was that people really love Ukraine. They were quite keen to tell me just how close they felt to the people of Ukraine. There's like a fraternal kinship. Many of them have relatives there, and they really have understood this to be an effort by the Russian military to liberate Ukraine from what they understand to be fascists and Nazis. So they really have absorbed all of the propaganda that the government have given them. The other theme I really noticed when I was there, I asked them, well, what do you feel about the consequences of this? Do you worry about Russia being led down this path towards a new Soviet era? They didn't worry. In fact, Lindsay, they welcomed it.
Oh, well, so much misinformation out there. James Longman in Moscow for us. Thanks so much, James. Joining us now for more is Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby. Thank you so much for joining us tonight during what we know is an extremely busy time. French President Macron spoke with Putin today. French officials came away thinking that the worst is yet to come. How concerned is the Pentagon about this conflict escalating beyond Ukraine's borders to a NATO country like Poland?
We're deeply concerned about escalation of violence inside Ukraine all by itself, and we're beginning to see, as the whole world is seeing, the Russians become more aggressive in their shelling and bombardment of city centers like Kharkiv and Kyiv, in places like Kherson down in the south. The violence keeps getting much stronger, much more bloody, and that's concerning all on its own. Clearly, we don't want to see this escalate beyond borders into NATO territory, which is why we have added additional force capability to our allies on the eastern flank of the alliance. It's why we're flying air patrols in NATO airspace to make sure that Mr. Putin understands that we mean it.
And I understand that the DOD has established a line basically with the Russian Ministry of Defense. What is the U.S. doing to make sure that there are no dangerous accidents or miscommunications between U.S. troops and Russians?
Well, what we've done is set up a deconfliction mechanism. It's not unlike what we've done in other places, even with other countries, where we can be able to jump on a line and make it clear to one another what we're doing, and just as importantly, Lindsay, what we're not doing, so that we can reduce the chances of miscalculations.
And the Ukrainians have just shown so much resilience in being able to hold off the Russians so far. What's impressed the Pentagon in particular the most about the Ukrainians' capabilities on the ground?
Well, I'll tell you, you're right. They've been fighting bravely in a very determined way, but also quite creatively. They have been wise in the way they have marshaled their resources. They know they're up against a numerically superior enemy with advanced capabilities at his disposal, but they are finding ways to slow down, to stymie, to frustrate those Russian advances on major population centers.
And that said, though, is there a larger belief that it's just a matter of time until Kyiv ultimately falls and succumbs?
You know, I think it's too soon to make a call like that. I really do. I mean, yes, the Russians have superior firepower and numbers at their disposal, but they have been surprised, Lindsay, at the effectiveness of the Ukrainian resistance. It has frustrated and flummoxed them as well and thrown them off their game. And what we're going to do in the United States, and of course other NATO allies are as well, is to continue to get security assistance to the Ukrainians so that they continue to do that, so they're able to continue to defend their country. The Russians do have superior numbers and capabilities at their hands. But again, they also have another option here, and that's diplomacy, and that's de-escalation. If Mr. Putin would do the right thing, lay down his arms, find a way to de-escalate and remove his troops from Ukraine. And those are diplomatic options, quite frankly, that he still has available to him.
And is there a part of you, though, that thinks that he might still choose diplomacy here at this point?
We can't be perfectly predictive about what's in Mr. Putin's mind, but we sure hope that he's sincere about trying to find a peaceful solution here, a diplomatic path that respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Now, they met, as you know, near the Belarusian border today. There's reports of a possible ceasefire. Those are encouraging steps, if true.
And we continue to see, of course, those troubling images of civilian areas being bombed. Do you believe that Russia is deliberately targeting residential areas at this point?
Well, we know that they are hitting residential areas and civilian infrastructure. In some cases, it's deliberate, like hitting media transmission towers and going after independent news sources in Ukraine. We believe those are deliberate. We're not exactly clear whether all the other damage to civilian infrastructure is in fact deliberate. If it is, that's deeply concerning, and certainly would be a violation of international law. There is being damage done to civilian and residential areas, and people are dying and being hurt by this.
After Putin raised the alert level of his nuclear forces, Secretary Austin postponed a previously scheduled nuclear missile test that was slated to occur this week. Right. Is there any indication at all that that decision has in fact lowered tensions?
Well, we hope so. Again, we continue to see the violence there in Ukraine, and we don't think we didn't postpone this test in the hope that it would stop his shelling and bombardment, but we definitely did postpone it to send him a very clear message about what a responsible nuclear power, how that power behaves with that incredible combat capability that we have. And we are hoping that the message was received by Mr. Putin.
Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby, again, appreciate your time joining us tonight.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And when we come back, a surreal scene in Florida. Thick fog leading to several deadly accidents. The House committee investigating January 6th now says the former president, Donald Trump, may have committed multiple crimes. We have the details. But up next, doctors and healthcare leaders sound the alarm about the small but vocal group of doctors pushing the use of the anti-parasite medication unproven in the fight against COVID. This is researchers look into whether it works and the alarming ease with which we're able to get this drug. Our in-depth investigation next.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Now, with so much hope for a brighter tomorrow filled with sunshine, it's time to
rise and shine.
And we're celebrating by hitting the road.
Let's do it.
Traveling all across the country.
Oh my God.
Rise and shine. Rise and shine. Let it shine.
Let it shine.
Shine. Yes, it's time to celebrate and smile with It's ABC's Good Morning America's Great Rise and Shine Tour.
Okay, now, I love me some GMA so much. Time for me to do, well, a little GMA-ish promo. Ready? GMA 7A every day. Boom, boom, boom.
Bring me your
friends. Yes, now we're talking. That's how you start the day with Robin, George, Michael, and GMA. Starting sharp at 7A every day. So go on. Just say,
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. You know it's America's #1 morning show, people.
Bring your friends.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.
Terror plot foiled in Garden City, Kansas.
That would have been one of the most deadly acts of domestic terrorism ever in the United States. It would have been Oklahoma City.
He put his family, himself, in jeopardy for us.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
My wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Welcome back. In some states, poison control centers have received a dramatic spike in calls tied to ivermectin. That's the anti-parasite medicine that is viewed by some as an important drug in the fight against COVID and an alternative to vaccines. But there is no definitive research saying that, and there's a fierce battle now playing out within the medical community as a result. Our Srivastava takes an in-depth look at the issue and the role that misinformation is playing in its popularity.
My brother, he called. He said, I got diagnosed with COVID. He said, you know, I tracked down a doctor who got me some ivermectin.
The controversy around ivermectin.
Ivermectin.
Should ivermectin be used to treat COVID-19?
People want to believe in miracles.
People just come in, oh, do you have ivermectin? Pay for it and go.
And one of the latest false hopes is in a drug that every pillar of the medical community says should not be used to treat COVID outside of clinical trials.
To date, there's been no studies that have been shown to prove that ivermectin works in the prevention or treatment of COVID-19.
But there are popular voices suggesting that it works.
I feel pretty incredible.
There is this treatment in ivermectin.
What Joe Rogan and others are saying hasn't been proven, but in this divided world where people are fighting over how to respond to the pandemic, the explosion of interest in ivermectin has led to a booming online industry.
You received ivermectin and he prescribed you 30 days supply.
Where we were able to legally buy it with home delivery without ever seeing, talking with, or even hearing from a doctor.
You don't have any medical knowledge or...
I don't have any medical knowledge at all. I'm so sorry, but I really don't.
The history of ivermectin isn't really that long. Doctors around the world have been using it since the late 80s to change lives, but only as a drug meant to help people suffering from head lice and other parasitic infections, or in higher doses, used to safely treat pets and livestock. The scientists who created it won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2015. Fast forward to March of 2020, to a research lab in Australia and a world that was scrambling to find ways to treat COVID.
We thought that maybe ivermectin might be useful.
A group of Australian researchers reported that when they dropped a small amount of the drug into a test tube of the coronavirus, some of the virus died in just 48 hours. But what happened in that test tube didn't prove that the drug could heal a person sick with COVID. And there are many scientists who say it should never have started a movement without more research. Soon there would be more small studies suggesting possible benefits, but not a single large, rigorous one showing that the drug treats COVID. But in the middle of the lockdowns, within a few months, there was a run on ivermectin around the world.
Our next speakers are the hero doctors going against the grain of what the establishment wants them to do.
Here at home, despite a warning from the FDA, there was now a community of American doctors like Dr. Pierre Corey preaching wild claims.
It basically obliterates transmission of this virus. If you take it, you will not get sick.
Sitting in his white coat before the U.S. Congress, he called it a, quote, miracle cure for COVID infections.
There is a drug that is proving to be of miraculous impact. And when I say miracle, I do not use that term lightly.
But that so-called miracle didn't work for Dr. Corey when he caught COVID months later.
Even though ivermectin is a good drug for some parasites, it has not been shown in a well-controlled, placebo-controlled trial to be effective in COVID.
Dr. Corey is not alone.
We are America's frontline doctors.
There are now small but loud groups of these physicians who are encouraging drugs like ivermectin online and discouraging vaccines. And there's money to be made. ABC News obtained this email from yet another group that sent this to recruit new doctors last summer, telling them that we have physicians making tens of thousands of dollars a month and that it's all cash pay. On one of the websites where they offer online consultations and give prescriptions for the drug, they share testimonials.
I think I have COVID. Oh, I know about ivermectin. I really believe that helped me get well.
And remember that the FDA and every other health agency is saying that this is not the way to treat COVID, but sales are blowing up anyway. In this chart from the CDC, you see the spectacular rise in prescriptions being filled for ivermectin. At one point, nearly 25 times what was normal.
I think it is time to stop the vaccines. If anything out there in COVID-19 needs to stop, it's the vaccine program.
This is Dr. Peter McCullough, a Texas cardiologist from a group called the Truth for Health Foundation. And he tried to tell me that a person's chance of dying from the vaccine is actually greater than getting COVID and dying from the disease.
You don't believe that the COVID vaccine is actually helping us, and that's the...
No, there's no evidence of that.
You don't believe that the COVID...
There's no evidence
you don't believe that any of the vaccines are helping Americans or helping...
No, they haven't.
But there's plenty of evidence. Public health experts say that in just 1 year, the COVID vaccines have saved more than 1.1 million lives in America alone, and that people who aren't vaccinated are 14 times more likely to die of COVID. He still argues that instead of the vaccine, doctors should be encouraging early treatment with medicines like ivermectin in combination with other therapies. And he says he's hopeful about a new drug to treat COVID from Pfizer.
A lot of patients are coming in and demanding some of these drugs. Nurses are being threatened and sometimes physically harmed. There's a poison in the air. And a lot of people feel that people like you are putting it there.
I've never heard that before, but I can tell you.
If a patient is being denied ivermectin, should they be outraged?
Patients have seen their family members die.
But the growing outrage now is from the overwhelming majority of the medical community, saying that these doctors are dangerously spreading misinformation. The message is the same from the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, the American Medical Association, and the World Health Organization, that COVID-19 vaccines are safe and effective, and that the benefits far outweigh any risk of harm. And like dozens of randomized trials before it, there's a new reputable study of 500 patients in the Journal of the American Medical Association that found, quote, no evidence that ivermectin works in reducing the risk of severe disease.
Ivermectin is not a recommended treatment for COVID-19. It is not a recommended drug to prevent COVID-19.
We went to Duke University in North Carolina, where they're leading the largest ever randomized study of ivermectin with patients across 50 states.
You would be randomized between the active drug and the placebo.
They'll soon answer if it helps treat COVID at all, and right now, they're not recommending the drug either.
I certainly understand at the beginning of the pandemic, when we did not have an understanding of what may or may not work, that people were looking for solutions so-called off the shelf. But at this point, where there are 3-4 drugs that can be used for COVID-19, we should be using those first instead of
pushing this drug.
That's right.
Hey, welcome back. It is Phil Valentine Show.
Conservative talk show host Phil Valentine was one of the most powerful voices pushing repurposed medicines like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and preaching against the vaccines.
I've never seen a drug so vilified in my life.
He was unvaccinated, got sick with COVID last fall, and tried ivermectin. Weeks later, he died. Do you think that taking the ivermectin gave your brother false confidence?
I think it made him feel better.
You still firmly believe in the efficacy of ivermectin for use?
I do.
At the same time, his family tells us they now wish he had taken the vaccine.
I was unvaccinated until this thing happened with Phil.
You were?
I was. I can take you to about 12 houses in this neighborhood where people got vaccinated because of what happened to Phil.
His death.
It caused a whole bunch of people to get vaccinated.
But Phil Valentine is just one drop of caution in a bucket full of disinformation. The clamor to get ivermectin is so great that typical supplies are hard to find. And people have been clearing shelves at animal feed stores, buying versions of the drug meant for livestock.
Driving a steep increase in demand while also sending people to the hospital.
The FDA had to publish this warning, telling Americans that you are not a horse or a cow, and that these animal-grade medications could be toxic. I'm interested in ivermectin.
Okay.
Which brings us to how easy it was to get the drug on the internet. After filling out an online application, I paid a $90 fee for the physician consultation. The very next day, a caller rang from Alabama.
Are you allergic to any medication?
I'm not allergic to any medication, no.
I don't have any medical knowledge as far as the medicine or even about COVID.
A couple days later, someone called from a pharmacy in New York State, offering me 28 pills and next-day delivery for $240.
I will be sending a
payment link on your cell phone number.
Okay.
Just click on that link and you can put in your card information and press pay.
I never once talked with a physician or nurse practitioner. The drugs arrived by FedEx in 2 days. Although legally doctors can prescribe ivermectin to treat COVID, Congress is still investigating.
We are significantly concerned. We think there are millions of dollars being made by various groups selling misinformation.
It's all too much for emergency room physician Nick Sawyer in California. He leads a group of doctors called No License for Disinformation, who are helping to report doctors to their state medical boards, doctors who they say are spreading things that are untrue.
We started a website, and we have a place where people can look up a physician's license by their name and then go to the specific state where they can file a complaint.
And the state medical boards are getting an earful, reporting a 67% increase in complaints about medical providers accused of sharing false or misleading information on COVID-19.
If any doctor wants to challenge my integrity, or if any medical board wants to have a discussion with me, bring it on.
We are fighting a war, and it's an information war. And it's based on this understanding of what we're seeing in our hospitals, the unnecessary suffering and death of people who were refusing to get the vaccines.
This is clearly a fight, because for many, the truth is often inconvenient, and people do love to believe in miracles. But right now, the science says that ivermectin isn't one of them.
Our thanks to Steve Osensami for bringing us that. Still ahead here on Prime, the investigations being launched against TikTok will explain. And wheat and corn prices surge higher as a result of the war in Ukraine. We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. The First Lady of Florida declares she has won her fight against breast cancer.
The deeper you go into black markets, the darker it gets.
Traffic, Wednesdays at 9 on National Geographic.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, the hunt. True Crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
The ladies you love, the hottest topics happening now. There's only one place to find it all.
You guys are having the hard conversations. I love The View.
The most watched #1 daytime talk show is The View. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi!
This mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasured that day.
I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby.
It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new videos.
Breaking news overnight.
Your money and concerns about inflation.
The pandemic is not over.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was just saying. And what to expect in the day ahead.
From the top of the world, baby!
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Weekday morning starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
She was
diva,
drama,
money and fame,
amazing, the prime housewife.
Then suddenly, we've seen a lot of things on The Real Housewives, but we've never seen anyone be arrested.
Unpredictable rich woman. Sign me up.
Welcome back, everyone. Rising inflation has been squeezing American families for months at this point, but now the war in Ukraine is driving the price of wheat and corn products even higher. We take a look by the numbers. Known as the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine provides 12% of the world's total wheat exports and was estimated to supply some 16% of the world's corn exports this year, according to the AP. Russia, for its part, is a key producer of fertilizer. Wheat prices have already jumped a staggering 37% so far in 2022, and corn prices have jumped 21%, and that's after prices rose more than 20% throughout 2021. Companies like Kellogg and General Mills have been passing their higher wheat and corn costs on to consumers, and there are signs of even more pain ahead. Wheat futures have hit a 14-year high, according to Bloomberg, and corn is now at a 9-year high as the war in Ukraine chokes off production and trade. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. A verdict in the case against the officer charged for his role in the Breonna Taylor raid. The lawmaker who had to pull out of his congressional race after admitting to an affair with an ex-wife of a former ISIS member. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
National parks are incredibly safe places. A crime will happen.
Hey, Mama. My wife has fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi!
This mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day.
I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby. It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
New York City's Mayor Eric Adams is expected to announce tomorrow on whether he will lift the city's school mask mandate and end proof of vaccination requirements for bars, restaurants, gyms, and theaters. Those COVID restrictions would be lifted on Monday. The CDC says more than 90% of the U.S. population is now living with low or medium COVID transmission, areas where masks are no longer suggested. The NFL suspending any remaining COVID protocols effective immediately. The league telling all 32 teams they can drop masks and testing requirements, even for unvaccinated players. Teams must still follow state and local laws and must have a facility available to test anyone reporting COVID symptoms.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Brett Hankerson, not guilty of wanton endangerment in the first degree.
Former Louisville police officer Brett Hankerson acquitted on all charges in connection with the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor. Hankerson was not charged with Taylor's death. He was accused of firing wantonly into a neighboring apartment. The jury deliberated for just over 3 hours and found him not guilty of all charges.
Visibility dropped to 0.
Part of I-95 in Florida shut down this morning by a series of car crashes.
To see the cars, the SUVs, and the semi-trucks scattered across both north and southbound I-95.
When you look at some of these cars in the northbound lanes, there are people that survived that don't know how that happened.
Florida Highway Patrol Lieutenant Kim Montez says 3 people did not. Investigators blame a combination of thick fog and smoke from a controlled burn alongside the freeway that caught drivers off guard.
When you came on down the road, everything just went white. You couldn't see nothing.
Among the many injuries was a child airlifted to a hospital.
Couldn't see. I mean, you just couldn't see. You just rolled up in it. Even with the flashes on, you couldn't see. I probably couldn't even see my hand.
Republican Congressman Van Taylor garnered the most votes in Tuesday's GOP congressional primary in Texas, but he has pulled out of the race after admitting to having an affair.
The woman involved has been described as a former Islamic jihadist, and the story of the affair was about to go public. But now Texas election officials and the state Republican Party have a quandary. Does the candidate who finished second to Van Taylor automatically advance to November's general election, or does he face the number 3 vote-getter in the May 24th runoff?
TikTok is under investigation over concerns the platform may be harmful to the mental health of children.
A collection of attorneys general from 8 states are looking into TikTok promoting its app to children and then trying to keep those children using it for as long as possible. They want to know what harms that could cause, and if that's the case, whether TikTok knew about it. Now, TikTok tells us they appreciate that the state attorneys general are focusing on the safety of younger users. They say they look forward to providing information on the many safety and privacy protections that they have for teens. Now, this is an extension of an investigation into Instagram. That was announced back in November, and several studies have linked that app to mental health issues like depression, social anxiety, and eating disorders. There hasn't been yet that much research into TikTok. This investigation could spur that.
Now to a serious allegation against former President Trump by the House committee investigating the Capitol riot. In a new court filing, they say that Trump may have engaged in a criminal conspiracy in his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, an allegation the former president denies. And joining us now is ABC Chief Washington Correspondent, Mr. John Karl in the flesh.
Great to be here.
So good to have you. Tell us about the new details that really stuck out to you in this filing.
Well, first, I think it was significant that they outlined 2 possible crimes committed by the president, the former president of the United States. One, obstruction of a government proceeding, obviously January 6th, the counting of the votes, and another related crime. These are crimes that, you know, they don't, it's not an indictment, but it looks a little bit like a referral to the Justice Department. But what struck out to me more than even that were the details in what they presented. They first of all point out that based on interviews that they've had with people working in the White House on January 6th, they say that the evidence is that Trump knew that the attack was underway, that the building had been breached when he sent that tweet out saying Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do the right thing. So he knew what was going on, and he still did nothing to stop it, and in fact ran out and said that his vice president didn't have courage while his vice president was actually under threat.
Putting his life potentially.
Yes. And the other thing is, it says point blankly that one of the president's top campaign advisors told him flatly shortly after the election that he was all but certain to lose, that these challenges were not going to work, that he had lost the election. That advisor, it says in a footnote, was Jason Miller. Jason Miller was one of the top people on the campaign, and it said that he told this under oath to the committee, cooperating with the committee, and Miller, by the way, stayed with Trump after January 6th. He stayed with him after January 20th and went down to Mar-a-Lago and remained one of his top advisors. And he, not only cooperating with the committee, but telling the committee essentially that the big steal was a big lie.
And we do know that these lawmakers cannot actually charge Trump with a crime, but it sounds like their evidence that they gather could help prosecutors make a case. Jonathan Karl, thank you so much as always.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And tonight we remember a fighter in the battle for civil rights, Autherine Lucy, the first black student at the University of Alabama. After fighting for the right to attend, she lasted only 3 days in class back in 1956, facing death threats and attacks by mobs. The university suspended and ultimately expelled her. But 32 years later, she was back and graduated with a master's in education. The university later dedicated a clock tower to her, and shortly before she passed away, they named a building in their College of Education after her. Autherine Lucy Foster was 92 years old. And before we go tonight, the image of the day. This Hungarian police officer carries a refugee from Ukraine across train tracks. More than 1 million have now fled that war-torn nation. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Next hour, we're taking a closer look at the refugee crisis playing out in Europe. David Muir brings us the latest on that from Poland. And also my conversation with iconic rapper Chuck D, the songs that he says changed the world. Stay with us.
America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms. More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source. Take America's #1 news with you, anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
The deeper you go into black markets, the darker it gets.
Traffic, Wednesdays at 9 on National Geographic.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Christopher Steele.
The guy who picked a fight with 2 presidents, and he's lived to tell the tale.
That now infamous dossier.
Supposedly a tape showing prostitutes hired by Donald Trump urinating on a bed, and would be quite a tape if it in fact existed.
I said take out the PP tape.
It quickly became a question of how much of this was accurate.
This is the stuff of movies.
A lot of this is the stuff of movies. A story of epic proportions.
Phony stuff.
It's a bunch of crap.
It changed history.
Hi there, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. A 28-year-old man experiencing homelessness has been charged with hate crimes and a string of unprovoked attacks on Asian women here in New York. Police say Steven Zajanc assaulted 7 women in different Manhattan neighborhoods over a 2-hour period on Sunday. Most were punched in the face. One was also shoved to the ground. An explosion at an apartment building in Silver Spring, Maryland is caught on camera. At least 10 people were rushed to the hospital, 5 of them in critical condition. The blast destroyed the 4-story building and neighboring complexes were evacuated. The cause is under investigation. Purdue Pharma reached a nationwide settlement over its role in the opioid crisis. The Sackler family, who owns the company, boosted their cash contribution to as much as $6 billion in a deal that protects them from civil lawsuits. The family must also give up control of the company so it can be turned into a new entity that uses its profits to fight the country's opioid crisis. But we begin this hour with some disturbing reports of shelling near Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant. You're looking at images from the plant in northwestern Ukraine. operation. A spokesperson for the plant says tonight that it was hit and that rescuers have not yet been able to put out the fire due to shelling, but they say there is no information about any release of radiation. We will, of course, continue monitoring this unfolding story. And all of this comes as Russian troops push their way into Ukraine from several angles tonight. And President Vladimir Putin says their attack is going according to plan. But Ukrainians are still holding out, standing strong. Tonight, our Ian panel asks Ukraine's president how long that can last. He has the latest from Kyiv.
Tonight, Russia again striking civilian areas. A devastating attack on Chernihiv, a city 90 miles north of Kyiv. Dashcam footage capturing the impact. A freeze frame shows multiple projectiles about to strike as unsuspecting people walk down the streets. And then, the explosions, sending residents running for their lives. 33 were killed, 18 wounded, according to the city emergency services. If confirmed, it'll be the largest single loss of civilian life in this conflict so far. The rescue operation suspended because of ongoing shelling. As the net closes in on many major cities, the defenders of the capital are digging in. Defences are now being set up across the city. Concrete barricades, tank traps, as the city prepares for a Russian assault. We met a defiant President Zelensky today at a secret location in the capital.
For how long can you hang on?
I don't know, he said. I don't know how long. It doesn't depend on time, it depends on us. And when I asked if he'd leave the country, Zelensky was adamant.
No.
But just 30 miles from where we were speaking, the full scale of the horrors being inflicted upon Ukraine. This is what a scorched earth policy looks like, and it doesn't discriminate between soldier and citizen. Hard to imagine that just 1 week ago, this was an ordinary neighborhood, with families going about their lives. The Kremlin seems to be having most success in the south. After taking Kherson, the first major city to fall in this conflict, Russian troops bearing down on Mykolaiv, and the Russian fleet approaching Odessa in what looks like an attempt to seal off Ukraine from the Black Sea coast. Amid the sound of war, they're still talking. A second round of urgent negotiations was held today between Ukrainian and Russian officials. Both sides have provisionally agreed to possible temporary ceasefires in some places and to open humanitarian corridors for civilians to leave besieged cities. But the Ukrainian side saying, unfortunately, we didn't get the results we'd hoped for. The largest city under Russian siege right now is Kharkiv in the east. It's been mercilessly bombed for days. With the fall of Kherson, Kharkiv and 3 other cities are now encircled by Putin's troops. But outside Kyiv, the miles-long Russian convoy has been stalled for days, a few miles outside the city. A senior US official telling ABC News the convoy seems to be stalled by Ukrainian resistance and supply problems. And as the Russians move up from the south, a siege of this city seems unavoidable. President Putin today claiming the invasion was going strictly according to plan and that all objectives were being met. The reality on the ground suggests otherwise. But he ominously declared Ukrainians and Russians are one people. Earlier, Putin spent 90 minutes on the phone with French President Macron. A source in the French government telling ABC News tonight the fear is that the worst is yet to come. And that's the fear in much of Kyiv tonight, where as many as 15,000 people have been taking shelter in the subway. But there is defiance and unity here. Ukrainian lawmakers singing their national anthem in parliament before starting their work today.
Some powerful images there. Ian Panel joins us once again from the Ukrainian capital tonight. Ian, we saw that you met with President Zelensky at that secret location with other members of the media today. Give us your impressions of how he's doing, how he's shouldering all of this as he leads his country through war.
Yeah, Lindsay, I mean, he was relaxed, very engaging. You know, he didn't stand on the podium. He pulled up a chair and sat literally 2 feet in front of me. But he's tired. He's surviving on just a few hours' sleep a night. He thanked President Biden for the support and sanctions, not just America, but obviously a lot of other countries, especially in Europe as well. But what he really wants is a no-fly zone. And of course, in his heart, he knows this is something that the rest of the world, America, can't agree to, because it would mean deploying forces into this conflict and potentially running into some kind of skirmish, or perhaps even greater, against Russia. And that's something that everyone's ruling out. But of course, what he knows is that he's facing an overwhelmingly stronger Russian force, which is bearing down on this city and other cities around the country. You know, let's not forget that this is a former actor who had relatively low approval ratings just a couple of weeks ago, and he's had to rise to the occasion, not just as commander-in-chief, but a wartime leader with the conscience and destiny of the nation on his shoulders. He knows this is an existential moment, not just for him, because the Russians are undoubtedly targeting him and his family, but for his city and his country. Lindsay?
Ian Panel, thanks so much again for your reporting on the ground there in Kyiv. On the border of Ukraine and Poland, a refugee emergency is unfolding. The UN says that more than 1 million people have fled, half of them children. World News Tonight anchor and managing editor David Muir talked to those children about their country and about their fathers who are staying behind to fight.
We drive to the train station in Poland, just over the border from Ukraine, where we are told a humanitarian crisis is unfolding. We arrive, and immediately we see it. We hear it, the cries. The frightened children, the boy crying to his mother, saying, "I am tired, I am so tired." So many of these families traveling for days.
It's just an extraordinary thing to witness here. The train has arrived from Ukraine here in Poland. You can see the baby here in this carriage. So many young children brought by their families to safety. And as you walk through the crowd here, you can see the sheer number of families who've arrived here. Children with their winter coats, but little else. Many parents telling me it was simply too dangerous to stay. Some had been hiding in basements for days.
There is an unmistakable urgency here. People on the phone, families desperate for help. Two young mothers, sisters, who escaped Ukraine with their children.
What has this journey been like?
They tell me this is their fate. What else can we do? We have to keep our children alive. We ask about the fathers.
Have either of them stayed behind to fight the Russians?
Alla says her husband is not in the army, but yes, he stayed behind to fight.
You believe you will go back home? Yeah.
Like so many of the children we met here, their children carry stuffed animals too. Alexei and his favorite dog.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yes, you do.
These two mothers and their children spent 22 hours on 2 trains to get here.
Our children sleep in the floor,
The floor.
Floor.
Of the train?
Yes.
I ask them about Vladimir Putin. There is silence and fear. But then they tell me we want our freedom.
You want freedom?
Yes.
You want to keep your freedom?
Yes.
This young mother with her 4-year-old son and their dog.
You brought the dog too?
Yes.
You did?
Child dog.
Yes, the child and the dog.
Yes.
It took them 6 days to get here.
It's war. It's people die.
We see the pain in her face when she tells us her mother and brother are still there.
Do you fear for their safety?
Yes.
Tonight, the UN now says there are more than 1 million refugees. 500,000 of them are children. A little girl clutching her doll. And this family from Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, under assault from the Russians.
You came all the way from Kharkiv.
Yeah.
They told me they could hear the bombs, the missiles, landing all around them.
You could hear it?
Yeah. It's really loud. Around the city we can hear every bomb. And people's houses are destroyed by these bombs, and many people who died, they just go outside to fill the bottle of water, and the rocket just...
It's terrifying. And you tried to stay as long as you could?
My father is still in Ukraine because he can't
She fears for her father's life.
I hope that Ukraine will
survive.
Yes, you will.
But you don't know.
And we come to home, our Ukraine.
But now, a big sister helping to look out for her 8-year-old brother, Misha.
His favorite bear?
He really loves him.
There are so many mothers and their children here. Through this window, a crush of need. We see the room set aside just for them. Families carrying one suitcase of belongings and a little boy's wave. We head into this room where we find strangers who've come from all over holding signs. A couple from Denmark holding their sign. They have room for 8 persons, free.
Oh, you can have my number too.
We witness their kindness, getting information from a young woman. They will now help.
Then we all go together.
You have offered to take people with you?
Yes.
And how many people are you trying to take?
8 people all in all.
Yeah.
We went here in 2 cars.
What made you decide to do this?
Because we needed to do something.
There is so much need here. A little boy sleeping on a bench in the middle of the train station, and families unsure where they'll sleep tomorrow.
World News Tonight anchor and managing editor David Muir joins us now from Poland and Ukraine border. David, thanks so much for talking with us tonight. You've been to a number of conflict zones and are planning to do a primetime special tomorrow on ABC. We saw your report, including the tears and the teddy bears and the kindness of people opening up their homes. What has moved you? What has struck you the most on the ground there so far?
Well, you know, Lindsay, I know you're a student of history, too, and what immediately strikes you is that the scenes that you're met with when you arrive here at the train station, and we're not far from the Ukraine border here in Poland, are scenes reminiscent of World War II. And, you know, we have reported this for many weeks now, that the situation unfolding in Europe is the likes of which they haven't seen as far as a ground war, an unprovoked invasion, the worst they've seen since World War II, quite frankly. And when you see the families get off the trains here carrying, you know, backpacks or one piece of luggage, and that's all they have of their belongings. The UN out with that number, more than 1 million refugees now from Ukraine fleeing safety for their families. And this was stunning. This came out just today. They believe that 500,000 refugees are in fact children. So this is a generation of young people who will be affected by this long term. You see the resilience in their faces. You know, a little guy waved at me today, the smiles they're carrying. A teddy bear, or there's one who was carrying Flounder from a movie I'm sure you know, Lindsay. And I always think of the stories of children and their resilience, but of course the parents too, who've tried to create this environment so that their children aren't as fearful as really the rest of the world is watching this unfold. And so many of the families told me they hope to go home. They want their free Ukraine back. They know that that's not necessarily what's going to play out here, but they remain hopeful, most importantly for their children who are watching and sensing their parents' every move here. But I have to tell you, Lindsay, you also mentioned the generosity when you were tossing it to me. There are people who have driven here from all over Europe. I met a couple from Denmark holding up a sign that said, "We have room for 8 persons, free." That's what their sign said. They basically drove 2 cars, 2 separate cars, a husband and wife, to fill their cars with people. They're going to take them home to Denmark and take care of them until they can find a place to live and a new chapter in their lives.
And people just opening up their hearts and their homes. David, thank you so much for your reporting and talking with us tonight. We are looking forward to your primetime special tomorrow night.
Thanks, Lindsay.
The flow of people escaping Ukraine is now a humanitarian crisis, and for those who stay, it could be life-threatening. Joining us now from Geneva is Ravina Shamdasani, the spokesperson for the United Nations Human Rights Office. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let's start with the 1 million refugees that have fled Ukraine, half of them children. What can the international community do to help the families trapped in the war zone who are unable to flee?
Well, thanks, Lindsay. Indeed, it's the numbers have escalated so rapidly that people, countries, neighboring countries are struggling to cope. What we do welcome is the spirit in which these refugees are being welcomed into neighboring countries in such large numbers. We hope that this kind of solidarity and this kind of generosity of spirit and this kind of respect for international human rights law and international refugee law can be extended to all those who are trying to flee without discrimination. There have been some worrying reports at the border of differential treatment, discriminatory treatment of people who are non-Ukrainian nationals. And we do hope we will see an end to that kind of treatment and that this generosity of spirit will be extended to all those who are fleeing conflict.
And I just want to follow up on that. What is being done about the discrimination at the border to eliminate that or at least decrease it?
Well, UN agencies are present. UNHCR is present on the ground in the various countries. Various humanitarian agencies are present as well. And we have been advocating with the authorities directly, and we have been speaking out publicly about the need to ensure that all those who need protection receive it immediately and in a timely fashion.
There have been at least 249 civilians killed in Ukraine, more than 550 injured, and it does not appear that Russian President Vladimir Putin will slow down these attacks. There have been reports about banned weapons like cluster bombs being used. What do you know about that, and just how concerned are you?
No, we have seen reports of cluster bombs being used. We've seen them striking civilian targets, including residential buildings. The use of such wide area impact weapons is very likely to lead to significant numbers of civilian casualties. And we have been urging the authorities to seize the use of these weapons, particularly in populated areas. We are very concerned. I mean, the rhetoric has been rising, and with it, the kinds of attacks that we're seeing, the kinds of weapons that are being used are also getting much more worrying. As the General Assembly requested in its resolution yesterday, and as the Human Rights Council has been discussing today, there's a real need to bring this military attack to a halt.
Does your group advise people who are still inside Ukraine to try and leave, or do you believe it's too dangerous to leave at this point?
We actually still have staff in Ukraine. We are staying, we're delivering. There's a lot of misinformation going around, which is why it's even more important for our UN human rights monitors to remain on the ground, to be able to monitor the situation, to see what's happening to civilians, to carry out these kinds of assessments of the number of civilian casualties that are occurring in increasing numbers over the past few days. I mean, on whether people should stay or flee, that really is a security assessment that they need to do on the ground. What we would urge is that all those who need to flee are afforded the protection that they need, and that all parties to the conflict do ensure that international humanitarian law is respected and civilians and civilian infrastructure are protected.
141 countries in the United Nations Assembly voted to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. How does a vote like this hold Russia accountable?
You know, there's a lot of attempts by the international community to hold Russia accountable for this military attack. The Human Rights Council also in Geneva held an urgent debate today, and they hope to create a commission of inquiry, which is an investigative body that is meant to look into the ongoing human rights violations and potential violations of international humanitarian law that are occurring. We have also seen the imposition of sanctions. Now, on sanctions, what we do have to stress is that it is essential that the sanctions are clearly targeted and that there is no undue impact on the human rights of civilians. That any sanctions that take place are not broad sectoral sanctions. They're carefully assessed, and their implementation and their impact is carefully reviewed.
5 countries voted against the condemnation and 35 abstained. What do you have to say to those countries?
Well, listen, I think there needs to be a concerted call by the international community that the situation is unacceptable. The pummeling of civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine is unacceptable, and the military attack by the Russian Federation needs to be brought to an end immediately.
Do you have a message for the people of Ukraine tonight?
Our message is a message of solidarity. We are grieving with them. We are grieving for all those who are suffering, who have lost loved ones, who have been separated from loved ones, who are being forced to take up arms at this time, forced to take up arms at this time. We are there. We are going to continue to remain there and to monitor the situation, to document the civilian casualties, and to make sure that the voices of the people of Ukraine make it out of Ukraine. We will continue to advocate for them.
Ravina Shamdasani, we thank you so much for your time and joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And lately, we're starting to hear more about Putin's isolation as Russia's president continues to double down on his war. Our Inés de la Cuatara has the latest on French President Macron's efforts to keep the lines of diplomacy and communication open with Putin in the hopes of preventing an even bigger catastrophe.
Hey, Lindsay. Yeah, and French President Macron is currently the only Western leader still speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he's insisting that maintaining dialogue with Russia is necessary. The two men spoke again today. This was the third time they've spoken since the war broke out, and this time it was Putin who initiated the call. Macron told Putin that Russia was making a big mistake, that Putin had been lying and looking for pretexts when he'd been talking about wanting to denazify Ukraine. But Putin told Macron that he would not be stopping the war in Ukraine and that Russia would achieve its goals in Ukraine no matter what. So some alarming words from the Russian president there. And when you see that, it's hard not to give up faith in diplomacy. And certainly the U.S. has decided not to engage with Putin at this time. They feel that Russia isn't being genuine here, that Putin is engaged in what they're calling a pretense of diplomacy. But the French president, Macron, is determined to keep going. He even explained his decision to maintain dialogue with Russia in an address to the nation. He said that he would continue speaking with Putin for as long as it takes to get Putin to give up arms and to ensure that this crisis doesn't get any worse. That's another big concern here. And in fact, a source with the French president's office did say that the risk of this crisis spreading to other neighboring countries does exist. Lindsay?
Inez, thank you. For more on where the fighting stands on the ground, let's bring in our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz. Martha, Vladimir Putin said today that Russia's military operation is going according to schedule and that they are meeting their objectives. Just explain where things stand as far as progress that Russia has made in this invasion.
Lindsay, the Russians have taken control of their first major city, and this is the key port city of Kherson in the south. There was heavy resistance in the beginning, but it really did rapidly fall to the Russians. The Russians are now pummeling Kharkiv in the northeast, Ukraine's second largest city, and of course their sights are on Kyiv. Even with those setbacks with that convoy coming down from the north, they've decided they will now go up from the south, and they are working their way up from the south. This whole operation in Ukraine could take weeks, if not months, Lindsay, and it is bound to be more brutal and more bloody as we go forward.
And that's certainly the fear that the worst could still be ahead. Vladimir Putin still at the center of all of this. What do we know about his involvement in leading Russia's invasion?
A senior official told me Putin is described as erratic, but totally intent on seeing this war through. The senior official says he is spending more and more time in the military command center, which is basically a bunker under the Kremlin, demanding updates for the battle. Lindsay?
Martha Raddatz, our thanks to you. And now let's give you an update on that disturbing story that we told you about just a few minutes ago. A shelling near the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe. You're looking at images from the plant in western Ukraine. A spokesperson for the plant says tonight that it was hit and that rescuers have not yet been able to put out the fire due to shelling. They say there is no information about any release of radiation. This is about 350 miles away from Kyiv. In a tweet tonight, Ukraine's foreign minister is urging Russia to stop right away, saying if the plant blows up, it will be 10 times larger than Chernobyl. He's calling on Russia to allow firefighters to establish a security zone. We'll, of course, stay on top of this developing story. And still to come, remember that expensive U.S. fighter jet that plunged into the sea and the concerns about the Chinese trying to get it? We have an update to that story. But up next, we take an in-depth look at the drug ivermectin, why a small group of doctors are pushing the unproven drug in the fight against COVID, the research looking into whether it works, and the alarming ease with which we were able to get this drug.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
Okay, now, I love me some GMA so much. Time for me to do, well, a little GMA-ish promo. Ready? GMA 7A every day. Boom, boom, boom. Bring your friends. Yes, now we're talking. That's how you start the day with Robin, George, Michael, and GMA. Starting sharp at 7A every day. So go on. Just say,
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. You know it's America's #1 morning show, people.
Your friends.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I risked my life. I put my family in danger. If I was caught, they would have put a bullet in my head. But it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing to do.